The first rays of the morning sun shone on the modest bungalow, its peeling white paint a testament to its hardships, as did the girl standing beside it. Sarah, a slender figure with blonde hair gathered in a ponytail, was wiping her hands on her jeans and adjusting a cardboard sign that read, selling mom's Chemo garage ***. Her hands trembled slightly, giving away the calmness she was trying to maintain. The driveway was scattered with things that had once held cherished memories. Her mother's antique teapot collection, Sarah's children's books, the worn chair her father had sat in before he died. Each object seemed to tell its own story. The teapots had once been the centerpiece of Anna's joyous Sunday tea parties, their delicate design reflecting her quiet love of beauty. The books had fingerprints and faint scribbles on them, remnants of Sarah's childlike curiosity. And the chair, its fabric faded and its cushions slightly sunken, was a relic of her father's comforting presence, a place where bedtime stories were read and life's cares vanished for a moment. Giving up these treasures was tantamount to parting with the people and moments they represented, but Sarah knew it was the only way forward. Every item she placed on the makeshift table felt like a small betrayal of her past, but there was no other choice. The medical bills were relentless and her mother's condition was worsening. The bungalow, though small, had been their refuge, but its walls now seemed to echo with fear of what might await them in the future. Sarah's mother, Anne, had been everything to her. Anne had raised her alone, working double shifts at the local diner to provide for them. Memories of Anne singing lullabies on sleepless nights or cheering from the bleachers at Sarah's school games replayed endlessly in Sarah's mind as she set things up. The thought of losing her mother was unbearable, and yet the weight of reality pressed on her shoulders like a leaden cloak. The once bright Anne faded, her laughter replaced by painful smiles, her strength drained by the inexorable disease. People began to trickle into the house, going through things with casual aloofness. Some haggled over the price, others smiled politely in sympathy. Sarah's lips curved in a forced smile at each buyer, but her eyes carried the weight of her silent despair. Each interaction with customers was like opening a small wound, as she couldn't help but think about what these sales symbolized. Fragments of her mother's life being exchanged for fleeting currency. She tried to focus on practical things, counting the change and thanking people, but her thoughts betrayed her. There was fear for the future and a desperate hope that this sacrifice might make a difference. With each exchange, it was as if a weight had settled on her that she couldn't shake off. With each item sold, it felt like she was giving away fragments of her life, her mother's story. The morning wore on, and a tall, weathered man in a cowboy hat and worn denim jacket walked by. His stride was confident and his presence was commanding but unassuming. He stopped a few feet from the driveway, surveying the scene with a thoughtful gaze. Sarah didn't immediately recognize him, but there was something undeniably familiar in his rough features and piercing gaze. The kind of faces she'd seen in the old movies her mother adored. Faces that spoke of endurance and resilience. The man approached the table where Sarah stood, his boots scraping softly on the gravel. "Good morning," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. "Good morning," Sarah replied, her voice strained but polite. She watched him pick up a dainty porcelain teapot with a floral pattern slightly tarnished by age. "It was my mother's favorite teapot," she said, unable to contain her emotion. She remembered how Anne had carefully brewed tea in that teapot every Sunday, a ritual that seemed like a small rebellion against their struggle. The man nodded, gently turning the teapot in his hands. "She must have good taste," he said, carefully placing it back on the table. Sarah felt a lump of pride and sadness form in her throat. For a moment she could almost hear her mother's voice, explaining why this teapot was special, and that warmth briefly chased away her despair. She swallowed hard and forced herself to smile, gratitude and sadness intertwined in her gaze. His eyes met Sarah's, and for a moment she thought he saw right through her. There was a kindness in his gaze, a silent understanding that made her not feel alone. "How much do you need?" he asked sharply, his voice flat but kind. Sarah blinked, startled. "I beg your pardon." "For your mom's treatment," he clarified, pointing to the sign. "How much do you need to cover it?" Her throat constricted. "A lot more than that amount will bring in," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not much chance, but I have to try." The man studied her for a while, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He counted out a wad of bills and placed them on the table. Sarah stared at the money, trying to comprehend what was happening. "This should help," he said simply. "I can't. I mean, I don't even know you, she stammered, her eyes filling with tears. The man's lips curved into a small, almost wistful smile. You don't need to know me, he said. Just promise me you'll take care of your mom. Thank you, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. He dipped his hat and turned to leave, but as he was walking away, a neighbor walked up to Sarah, wide-eyed. Do you know who it was? The neighbor asked, her voice brimming with excitement. Sarah shook her head, still stunned. It was Clint Eastwood, the neighbor said, as if the name itself held magic. Sarah widened her eyes and looked in the direction he was headed, but he had already disappeared around the corner. Her thoughts raced, torn between disbelief and awe. Who was this man who had burst into her life so unexpectedly and brought hope when she was on the brink of despair? Gratitude and curiosity overwhelmed her, and she clutched the money on the table like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, there was a lighter feeling on her chest, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of possibility. Thanks to Clint's unexpected generosity, Sarah was able to cover the cost of the next round of chemotherapy for her mother. The following weeks passed in a series of hospital visits, cautious hopes, and moments of quiet reflection. Gradually, Anna's condition began to improve. Her strength returned to her, and her laughter once again filled the little bungalow that had seemed empty for so long. The air in the house became lighter, and there was a renewed sense of possibility. One afternoon, Sarah busied herself arranging flowers in a vase, a habit her mother had passed on to her. Each flower seemed to carry a memory. Bright reds and soft yellows reflected moments of joy and resilience. As she carefully arranged the flowers, she thought about how this simple act had always been her mother's way of bringing beauty into their lives, even in the most difficult times. Now their arrangement was a quiet declaration of hope, a symbol of the healing that had begun to take root in their lives. She paused, remembering the kindness of the stranger whose generosity had spurred this change. She couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see him again, to thank him properly. One evening, as Anne sat on the porch, wrapped in a warm blanket, Sarah joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. The sky was colored pink and orange, a sunset that seemed like a gift. Mom, she asked quietly, do you believe in angels? Anne smiled, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. I believe now, she said, holding out her hand to Sarah. Together they sat in the fading light, surrounded by the quiet strength of their love and the promise of brighter days ahead. It seemed the whole world around them froze, holding its breath in reverence for their quiet moment of hope and healing. Time passed, and the days continued to bring small victories. Anna's health steadily improved, allowing her to regain her strength. The bungalow began to reflect their renewed hope. The garden bloomed with bright colors, and the scent of freshly baked bread, a hobby Anne had rediscovered, wafted through the air. Neighbors often stopped by, marveling at Anne's recovery and offering kind words of encouragement. One day, walking through town, Sarah noticed an old movie theater. The sign flaunted a Clint Eastwood classic, and her heart beat faster. She bought a ticket and sat alone in the dimly lit auditorium. As she watched the movie, she couldn't help but notice the parallels between the stoic hero on the screen and the man in her life. Tears streamed down her face as she quietly thanked the stranger who had given her hope when she needed it most. Back home, Sarah began documenting their journey. She wrote about the struggles, the kindness of strangers, and the strength she found in her mother's resilience. Her words poured onto the pages like a river, each sentence a testament to their shared struggle and the hope that helped them endure. She dreamed of someday publishing this story to inspire others facing seemingly insurmountable odds. One warm day, Anne gave Sarah a gift, a new teapot. Its design was different, but its purpose was the same. Together they made tea, sitting on the porch as they once had, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. The teapot became a symbol of their journey, of loss, love, and strangers who become angels when we least expect it.